Part 1. The conference room was packed with aliens from all over the galaxy. They sat in their special chairs, breathed different kinds of air through masks, and looked at each other with worried eyes. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of living crystal, but they all shared the same problem. They were losing the war. The large screen at the front of the room showed the damage. Red dots marked the places where entire planets had been destroyed. Yellow dots showed where battles were still happening. There were so many red dots now. The enemy was called the Krelthari Swarm, and they were winning. They had been winning for 3 years. Commander Vekthar stood at the front. He was from a species called the Praxians. His skin was blue and purple, and he had long tentacles on his face that moved when he talked. Right now, those tentacles were shaking with anger and fear. "We lost 12 more star systems this month," he said. His voice came through a translator so everyone could understand. "Our fleets are being destroyed faster than we can build new ships. We need help, or we need to run away to save our families." Next to him, Ambassador Lissa pulled up more information on the screen. She was from the Concordat, a group of peaceful trading species. Her people had never wanted to fight, but the swarm didn't care about that. Numbers scrolled across the screen, showing how many ships were lost, how many people had died, how many planets were now empty rocks floating in space. "Our computers predict we will lose everything in 8 months," Lissa said quietly. "Unless something changes very soon." The room exploded with noise. Everyone started talking at once. Some aliens wanted to gather all their people and flee to another galaxy. Others wanted to make a final stand and die fighting. A few suggested trying to talk to the swarm, even though everyone knew the swarm never talked. They just attacked and destroyed everything in their path. In the back corner of the room, a human woman sat quietly. Her name was Helen Cross, and she was Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. She'd been listening for 2 hours while everyone argued and panicked. Humans had only joined the galactic community 5 years ago. Most of these aliens still thought humans were primitive and weak. Helen waited until the room got a little quieter. Then she stood up. Everyone turned to look at her. Some looked curious. Others looked annoyed that this newcomer was interrupting. "Earth wants to help," Helen said calmly. Commander Vekthar's face tentacles twitched. It might have been a laugh or maybe just confusion. "Ambassador Cross, we thank you for offering. But Earth only has 6 warships. We have lost thousands of ships. What could your planet possibly do to help us?" Helen didn't get angry or upset. She just smiled a little. "We want to send 1 battleship." For a moment, nobody said anything. Then the room burst into chaos again. But this time it wasn't panic. It was laughter and disbelief. 1 battleship? Against an enemy that had destroyed entire fleets? Some aliens thought it was a joke. Others thought the humans were crazy or stupid. A delegate from the Zenith Empire stood up. He was tall and covered in golden scales. "This is insulting," he said loudly. "We are discussing the survival of our civilization, and the humans offer us 1 ship? 1 tiny ship from a species that just learned how to travel faster than light?" Other voices joined in. They said Earth should focus on defending itself. They said 1 ship would be destroyed in seconds. They said humans didn't understand how serious this war was, but Helen just kept smiling. She pulled out a small device and pressed a button. Information started flowing to every screen in the room. Technical specifications, weapons data, crew information. The name at the top read USS Defiance. "This is our ship," Helen said. "She will arrive at the front lines in 3 days. I suggest you watch what happens when she gets there." Vekthar looked at the information on his screen. His tentacles stopped moving, which meant he was thinking hard. The ship looked strange. It was smaller than most battleships he had seen. The weapons were listed, but the names didn't make sense to him. Railguns, missile pods, nuclear warheads? These were old technologies that most species had stopped using thousands of years ago. "Ambassador Cross," he said slowly, "I see your ship uses primitive weapons, kinetic projectiles and explosive devices. These are not effective against modern shields and armor." Helen's smile got a little bigger. "Maybe. Or maybe we know something you don't. Either way, you'll see soon enough." She gathered her things and walked toward the door. Before she left, she turned back to face the room. "My people have a saying. Don't judge a book by its cover. You've been fighting this war your way for 3 years. Maybe it's time to try something different." After she left, the room stayed noisy for a long time. Some aliens thought the humans were brave but foolish. Others thought they were just wasting resources. A few wondered if maybe, just maybe, these strange newcomers knew something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Commander Vecthar stared at the information about the USS Defiance. Something about it bothered him, but he couldn't figure out what. The ship was small and used old weapons, but the humans seemed very confident. Too confident for people sending a ship to certain destruction. He called up his military advisor, a young Praxian officer named Jektar. "What do you think about this human ship?" Jektar studied the data. "It makes no sense, Commander. Their weapons should not work against swarm armor. Their shields are weaker than ours. The ship is fast, but speed alone cannot win battles. Then why do they seem so sure it will help? Perhaps they are desperate and don't want to admit their weakness. Or perhaps they truly believe their primitive technology will somehow work." Vecthar's tentacles moved in a pattern that meant uncertainty. "Send a message to our fleet at the Helix Nebula. Tell them a human ship is coming to help. Tell them to be ready for anything. Should we adjust our battle plans to include them?" Vecthar thought about it for a moment. Then he shook his head.
"No, one ship cannot change our strategy."
"But watch what they do. If the humans have discovered something we missed, I want to know about it." 3 days later, the USS Defiance would arrive at the front lines. 3 days later, everything would change. But right now, nobody in the galaxy knew that except the humans, and they weren't telling anyone their secrets. Not yet. The conference ended, and the delegates went back to their ships and their planets. They would continue fighting the war the way they always had. They would lose more ships and more people, and they would wonder if the humans were brave or just foolish for sending one battleship against an unstoppable enemy. Time would tell. Time always did. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched space change around him. The bright streaks of faster-than-light travel faded away, and suddenly they were in normal space again. In front of them was the Helix Nebula, a huge cloud of gas and dust that glowed with colors. It was beautiful, but Jake wasn't looking at the nebula. He was looking at the war happening inside it. "Give me a status report," Jake said as he sat down in the captain's chair. Lieutenant Karen Shaw was in charge of weapons and tactics. She pressed buttons on her console and read the information out loud. "I'm detecting the enemy fleet. There are about 40,000 swarm ships in the main attack group. The Allied fleet has about 3,000 ships left, mostly small ones. They're being pushed back toward the Argent system." Next to Jake, his second-in-command, Daniel Price, let out a low whistle. 40,000 against 3,000. "Those are really bad odds." Jake smiled just a little. "That's exactly why they called us. Open a communication channel to the fleet commander." The big screen at the front of the bridge flickered and changed. Now it showed the bridge of an alien warship. Commander Vecthar appeared on the screen. He looked tired and hurt. Behind him, Jake could see smoke and sparks from damaged equipment. Alien crew members were running around trying to fix things. "Human ship," Vecthar said. His translator made him sound doubtful. "We got the message that you were coming. I have to tell you, we expected more than one ship." "We're all you get, Commander," Jake replied. "But we're here to help. Tell me what's happening in the battle." Vecthar pressed some buttons and a map appeared on Jake's screen. It was covered in red dots that showed enemy ships. There were so many red dots that they looked like a red cloud. "The swarm attacks us every 6 hours with a new wave. We fall back and they move forward. We've lost 60% of our fleet in 2 weeks. This is our last defensive position before the Argent system falls. If Argent falls, we lose everything." "I understand. We'll move to your front line and help." Several aliens on Vecthar's bridge made sounds of surprise and fear. Vecthar leaned closer to his screen. "Captain Morrison, I mean no offense to your courage, but you are one ship. Just one ship. The swarm will destroy you in minutes." Jake's smile got bigger. "They can try." Defiance out. The screen went dark. Around the bridge, Jake's crew went to work. They had trained for this moment for months. They knew exactly what to do. Every person on the bridge was calm and focused. "Ensign Lisa Moore, take us to the front line," Jake ordered. "Activate all combat systems. Let's show these aliens what Earth built." The USS Defiance moved forward, and as she got closer to the battle, the alien fleet got their first good look at the human ship. She was smaller than most of the big warships they used, but she was also sleeker and faster. Her armor was dark and angular, making her hard to see against the blackness of space. Strange pods covered her hull, and her engines glowed with a different color than any engine the aliens had seen before. The swarm noticed the new ship immediately. They were like a giant organism with one mind. When one swarm ship saw something, they all knew about it instantly. 1,000 swarm vessels broke away from the main group and headed straight for the Defiance. They were going to swarm the human ship and tear it apart. On the Praxian flagship, Vecthar watched his screen with horror growing in his chest. "They're going to be killed," he said quietly. But then the USS Defiance opened fire and everything changed. The first shots from the human ship surprised everyone. The aliens expected to see energy beams or plasma weapons. Instead, something completely different happened. Solid metal slugs shot out of the Defiance's guns at incredible speed. They were going so fast that they glowed from the heat of moving through space dust. "Railguns firing," Karen announced. "Full spread, all batteries active." The metal slugs hit the swarm ships with devastating force. The swarm had armor designed to absorb energy weapons. But these weren't energy weapons. They were solid chunks of metal moving at nearly the speed of light. The kinetic energy was massive. When a slug hit a swarm ship, the ship just came apart. It didn't explode dramatically. It just broke into pieces like someone had hit it with a giant hammer. 12 swarm ships were destroyed in the first 3 seconds of combat. "Launching missiles," Karen continued, "all birds away and going autonomous." Hundreds of small missiles shot out from pods on the Defiance's hull. But these weren't normal missiles. Each one had its own computer brain. They could think and make decisions faster than any biological being. The missiles flew through the swarm formation, dodging enemy fire and avoiding obstacles. Then they hit their targets and exploded with nuclear fire. 20 more swarm ships vanished in brilliant white flashes. On the alien flagship, Vecthar stood frozen. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His tactical officer was making sounds of shock and confusion. "Sir, the human ship has destroyed 47 enemy vessels in 15 seconds. And they're attacking even faster now." The Defiance did something that made all the aliens watching feel nervous. Instead of keeping her distance and fighting from far away, she flew straight into the middle of the swarm formation. Every other species in the galaxy fought from a safe distance. Humans flew right into the middle of their enemies. "Point defense is active," Lieutenant Chris Palmer called out from his weapons station. "Engaging close targets." Automatic gun turrets all over the Defiance's hull started spinning and firing. They tracked and destroyed small swarm fighter ships with computer precision. The human ship twisted and rolled through space, dodging enemy fire. Her pilot, Lisa Moore, was flying patterns that seemed impossible for a ship that size. She had been training in simulators since she was a teenager, and she knew every trick in the book. "Launching electronic warfare drones," Karen said, targeting their command network. Small round drones shot out from the Defiance and flew into the swarm formation. They positioned themselves carefully, then exploded. But these weren't normal explosions. They released electromagnetic pulses that fried electronic and biological systems. The swarm ships used organic neural networks to think and communicate. The pulses destroyed those networks. Dozens of swarm vessels went dark and started drifting in space like dead fish. Jake watched his tactical screen with satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. "Daniel, move power from the backup shields to the main guns. Let's hit them even harder." "Captain, that will leave our sides less protected," Daniel warned. "That's okay. They'll be too busy in front of us to attack our sides." The Defiance's main cannons started charging up. They drew huge amounts of power from the ship's fusion reactor. When they fired, the beams weren't smooth and pretty like in movies. They were focused streams of atomic particles moving at light speed. When the beams hit something, that thing turned into energy and stopped existing. 3 huge swarm carrier ships simply disappeared. The battle had been going for 20 minutes. In that time, the USS Defiance had destroyed over 300 enemy ships. She had taken some damage, but nothing serious. Her shields were still strong and her weapons were still firing. Then something happened that nobody expected. The swarm started to retreat. For 3 years, the swarm had never retreated from any battle. They always pushed forward, always attacked, always tried to destroy everything. But now they were pulling back from the human ship. They were afraid. On the Praxian flagship, Vecthar finally found his voice again. He had been standing silent for several minutes, just watching the impossible happen. "All ships," he said into his communication system, "advance on the swarm's right flank. The humans have created an opening in their formation. We must take advantage of it now." The alien fleet moved forward with new energy and hope. For the first time in months, they weren't running away. They were attacking. and they were winning. The Battle of Helix Nebula lasted for 6 more hours, but the outcome was decided in those first 20 minutes. The USS Defiance had changed everything. 2 weeks passed, and the USS Defiance became famous across the entire galaxy. Stories about the human ship spread from fleet to fleet, from planet to planet. Wherever the swarm pushed hardest, the Defiance appeared. Battles that should have been crushing defeats turned into surprising victories. Captain Jake Morrison and his crew were doing things that other commanders thought were impossible. Back on Earth, Ambassador Helen Cross sat in her office and read the reports coming in from the war. She smiled as she read them. The Galactic Council had completely changed their attitude toward humanity. 2 weeks ago, they had laughed at Earth's offer to help. Now they were sending messages every day, begging for more human ships. But Earth Command had been very clear about their plan. The Defiance was a test. If she succeeded, more ships would follow. If she failed, well, at least they would have tried. On the front lines, things were very different now. Commander Vekthar had gone from thinking humans were foolish to having deep respect for them. He sat in his private office with Captain Jake Morrison, looking at tactical maps and drinking something that was sort of like coffee, but not quite. "I still don't understand your weapons," Vekthar admitted. His face tentacles moved in a way that showed he was confused. "They are so primitive by our standards. You use kinetic projectiles, solid chunks of metal. You use nuclear explosives, which most species stopped using thousands of years ago. Why do these old weapons work so well?" Jake took a sip of his coffee. It was real Earth coffee that he had brought with him. Vekthar had tried it once and immediately regretted the experience. "That's exactly the reason they work so well," Jake explained. "The swarm evolved to fight against energy weapons. Their armor absorbs plasma and particle beams. They've never fought against solid projectiles moving at really high speeds. Their biological armor is completely useless against simple mass and velocity." Vekthar made a sound that his translator turned into a thoughtful hum. "But it's not just your weapons. Your tactics are completely different from ours. You fly directly into enemy formations. You take risks that would get any of our commanders arrested for endangering their crew. How do your people even survive fighting that way?" "Training and technology," Jake answered. "Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We got very, very good at warfare. Our computers can react faster than biological brains. Our pilots start training in simulators when they're children. By the time they join the military, they've already fought 10,000 simulated battles, and we build our ships to absorb damage and keep fighting. The Defiance can lose half her systems and still complete her mission." The door made a sound and Lieutenant Karen Shaw walked in. She looked tired because she had been working for 16 hours straight, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "Sirs, our intelligence team has broken the swarm's communication codes. We think we've found where they're building their ships." Jake stood up immediately. "Show me everything." A holographic display appeared in the middle of the room. It showed a star system deep in space that no one had explored before. The system was hidden behind a thick cloud of gas and radiation. Thousands of swarm ships were gathered there, floating around massive organic structures that were growing new ships like a plant grows fruit. "If we destroy these shipyards," Karen explained, pointing at the structures, "we could reduce their ability to build new ships by 60%, maybe more. But there's a problem. The system is deep in their territory. We would be completely alone, with no chance of reinforcements or rescue." Vekthar looked at the display with an expression that meant deep concern. "This would be a suicide mission. Even for your amazing ship, Captain Morrison. You would have to fight through thousands of swarm vessels, destroy the shipyards, and then fight your way back out. The probability of success is extremely low." Jake studied the holographic map for a long time. He thought about his crew. He thought about the people back on Earth who were counting on him. He thought about all the billions of people across the galaxy who would die if the war continued. Then he made his decision. "Karen, calculate a route to that system. Find the best path through their territory. Vekthar, we're going to need the rest of the fleet to create a big distraction. Can you do that?" The Praxian commander stood up straight. His tentacles moved in a way that showed determination. "After everything you have done for us, we will create the biggest distraction in the history of warfare. When do you need it?" 3 days from now. That should give us enough time to prepare and for your fleet to get into position." Vekthar extended one of his tentacles toward Jake. It was how his species shook hands. Jake gripped it firmly. "My people will remember what you are doing for us, Captain Morrison. Whether you succeed or fail, you have already saved countless lives. Jake smiled. We're going to succeed. Failure isn't something humans are good at accepting. After Vecthar left, Jake sat alone with Karen. She looked at him with concern. Sir, I ran the numbers 3 times. Even with the distraction, even with all our advantages, the odds of us surviving this mission are less than 30%. I know, Jake said quietly. But if we don't do this, the war continues. More people die. More planets burn. We have a chance to end it now. We have to take that chance, and the crew knows it's dangerous. I briefed them after I discovered the shipyards. They all volunteered to go. Every single person on this ship. Jake felt a wave of pride for his crew. They were the best people he had ever known. Tell them to get some rest. We leave in 3 days, and it's going to be the hardest fight of our lives. For the next 3 days, the Defiance prepared. The engineers checked every system twice, then checked them again. The weapons officers practiced their firing patterns until they could do them in their sleep. The pilots ran simulation after simulation, trying to find the best routes through enemy formations. Everyone knew what was at stake. On other ships in the fleet, alien commanders watched the human ship with a mixture of admiration and sadness. They were sure the Defiance was going to her death, but they also knew that her sacrifice might give the galaxy a chance to win the war. Vecthar organized the biggest fleet operation in years. He gathered every available ship and prepared them for coordinated attacks across 3 different star systems. The attacks would draw away every swarm ship they could, giving the Defiance her best chance. The night before the mission, Jake walked through his ship. He visited every section, talked to every crew member. He thanked them for their service and their courage. Many of them were young, barely out of their 20s, but they all had the same look in their eyes. They were ready. They were willing to risk everything for a chance to win. In the engineering section, he found Chief Engineer Pete Collins working on the reactor. Pete was an older man with gray hair and rough hands. He had been working on ships for 30 years. "How's she looking, Pete?" Jake asked. Pete wiped oil from his hands with a rag. "She'll hold together, Captain. I've tuned the reactor to give you every bit of power I can squeeze out. Just try not to push her past 115% capacity. Beyond that, I can't guarantee anything. I'll do my best. I know you will, sir." "You always do." Jake made his way to the bridge. Through the windows, he could see the stars. Somewhere out there, hidden in the darkness, was the swarm's greatest secret. Tomorrow they would attack that secret. Tomorrow they would risk everything on one desperate mission. Daniel Price was already on the bridge, checking systems. "Can't sleep either?" Jake asked. "Too much to think about," Daniel replied. "I keep running the mission through my head, trying to find ways to improve our chances." "Find anything?" "Not really. It's going to come down to speed, surprise, and a lot of luck." Jake nodded. "Then let's make sure we have all 3. The 2 officers stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars, waiting for dawn. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow they would either end the war or die trying. There was no middle ground, no room for half measures. It was all or nothing, and that was exactly how humans liked it. The attack began exactly at dawn, at least according to the clock on the Praxian flagship. In space, there was no real dawn, but military people liked to start operations at specific times. The Galactic Fleet launched their offensive against 3 different swarm positions at once. It was the largest coordinated attack since the war started, and it was designed to draw every available swarm ship to defend those positions. Far away from the fighting, the USS Defiance slipped through empty space like a shadow. All her lights were off. Her engines were running at minimum power. Her communication systems were silent. To any sensors scanning the area, she looked like just another piece of space debris. Captain Jake Morrison watched the display showing the distant battle. The fleet was doing its job perfectly, pulling the swarm's attention away from where it needed to be. "Coming up on the nebula cloud," Lisa Moore said quietly from the pilot's seat. Even though no one could hear them in the vacuum of space, everyone was talking in whispers. "Sensors are having trouble seeing through all the radiation and gas, but our navigation system is locked on the coordinates." Jake stood in the center of the bridge. His crew was around him, each person focused on their job. These people had become like family to him over the past months. "This is it," he said. "This is what we trained for." "Karen, confirm our target information." The tactical officer pulled up images on her screen. 3 primary shipyards and their support structures. The yards are biological, grown from living tissue, but they have weak points in their structure. I've programmed all our missiles with the exact targeting data. If we hit those weak points, the yards should collapse. Daniel Price checked the power systems. Sir, to destroy all 3 targets and fight our way back out, we'll need to push the reactor to 115% of normal capacity. Chief Collins says the ship can handle it, but there's definitely risk of damage or even failure. There's always risk, Jake said calmly. That's why they sent us instead of the main fleet. We take the risks that others can't. We're expendable, but we're also the best. If anyone can do this, it's us. The Defiance approached the edge of the nebula cloud. The cloud was massive, glowing with strange colors from the gases and radiation inside. It was beautiful and deadly at the same time. Lisa carefully guided the ship into the cloud using instruments instead of her eyes because visibility was almost zero. Inside the cloud, time seemed to slow down. Minutes felt like hours. Everyone was tense, waiting for something to go wrong. But Lisa was an excellent pilot, and the Defiance was a tough ship. They made it through the cloud without any problems. When they emerged on the other side, they saw a sight that would give anyone nightmares. The swarm's shipyard stretched across space like enormous flowers made of meat and bone. Each yard was kilometers wide, pulsing with biological energy. Inside each one, new swarm ships were growing, being born from organic matter. It was disgusting and fascinating at the same time. Thousands of swarm ships patrolled around the yards. More were launching every minute, fresh from the yards and ready to join the war. This was where the endless waves of enemies came from. This was the heart of the swarm's power. They've detected us, Lisa said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. Good, Jake said. That means they know we're here. Karen, fire everything we have. The USS Defiance transformed into a machine of pure destruction. Her railguns fired continuously, sending tungsten slugs through space at incredible speeds. Each slug hit a shipyard with the force of a small asteroid. The biological tissue of the yards couldn't withstand that kind of impact. Huge sections tore apart, spilling strange fluids into space. Missiles launched from every pod on the Defiance's hull, hundreds of them. All with their own guidance systems, all heading for different targets. They swarmed the second shipyard like angry bees. When they detonated, their nuclear warheads turned organic matter into vapor. The entire second yard began to collapse in on itself. The main particle cannons charged up and fired at the third yard. The beams were so powerful they lit up space around them. Where they touched the organic structure, matter simply ceased to exist. The yard burned and the fire spread through its biological systems like a disease. But the swarm wasn't going to let their shipyards be destroyed without a fight. Ships converged on the Defiance from every direction. They came in waves, firing their weapons as fast as they could. Energy beams and organic projectiles filled space around the human ship. The Defiance's shields flared as they absorbed the hits. At first they held strong, but there were so many swarm ships and they kept firing without stopping. The shields began to weaken. Shields at 60%, Chris Palmer called out from weapons control. 40%. 20%. Sir, shields are failing. Reroute power from life support, Jake ordered. We can breathe recycled air for a while. Lisa, get us out of this trap. Lisa's hands flew over her controls. The Defiance spun and dove, moving in ways that seemed to defy physics. She dodged through the swarm formation, using their own ships as cover. Behind them, all 3 shipyards were dying. Years of swarm production capacity was being destroyed in minutes, but they still had to escape, and that was going to be the hard part. A massive swarm battleship moved to block their path. It was 3 times larger than the Defiance and covered in weapons. It fired everything at once, a wall of destruction that no ship could survive. Brace for impact, Daniel shouted. The Defiance's armor took the hits. Outer plating shattered and flew away into space. Internal systems started failing. Lights flickered. Consoles sparked and went dark. In the engine room, Chief Pete Collins and his team worked frantically to keep the reactor stable as it was hit by enemy fire. We're losing systems all across the ship, Daniel reported. His voice was still calm, but Jake could hear the worry. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 5. Fire in the port engine room. We're venting atmosphere. Jake gripped the arms of his chair. Seal the breached sections. Focus all repair efforts on the engines and weapons. We need both to survive. Karen kept firing the weapons that still worked. Every shot counted now. Every swarm ship they destroyed was one less ship shooting at them. But there were hundreds of enemies and more were coming every second. "We're surrounded," Lisa said. She was still dodging and weaving. But there were swarm ships on all sides now. "I can't find a clear path out." For the first time since the mission started, Jake felt a cold touch of fear. Not for himself, but for his crew. These good people who had trusted him to lead them. Had he made a terrible mistake? Had his confidence doomed them all? Then something unexpected happened. Through the communication system, which shouldn't have been able to reach them this deep in enemy territory, they heard Commander Vekthar's voice. "Human ship Defiance, this is the Galactic Fleet. We have broken through the swarm's defensive lines. We are coming to your position. Hold on for 5 more minutes." Jake looked at Daniel in shock. How did they get here? The distraction attacks were supposed to be light raids, not a full offensive. Daniel was working his console, trying to get sensor data through all the interference. "Sir, I'm reading multiple allied fleets. Not just the Praxians. It looks like every species in the galaxy sent ships. There must be 5,000 allied vessels out there, and they're all heading this way." On the main screen, which was cracked but still working, they could see the truth. The Galactic Fleet had taken enormous risks and pushed deep into swarm territory. Ships from 40 different species were fighting together, coordinated perfectly, all trying to save one human ship. Vekthar's voice came again. "You saved us, Captain Morrison. Now we will save you. All fleet units. Maximum attack on the swarm forces surrounding the Defiance. Clear them a path home." The space around the Defiance filled with friendly ships. They crashed into the swarm formation like a tidal wave. The swarm ships, caught between the Defiance and the fleet, were destroyed by the thousands. A path opened up leading back toward friendly space. "Go, Lisa, go now," Jake shouted. The Defiance shot forward through the gap. Her engines screamed with strain, but they held together. Behind them, the Galactic Fleet kept the swarm busy. The human ship limped toward safety, damaged and bleeding air, but alive they made it. Against all odds, despite impossible numbers, they had destroyed the shipyards and survived. The days after the shipyard raid were busy and chaotic. The USS Defiance was badly damaged and needed major repairs. Her crew was exhausted, but alive. Most importantly, the mission had worked exactly as they hoped. Without their shipyards, the swarm couldn't replace the ships they lost in battle. For the first time in 3 years, the Galactic Fleet was winning. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the medical bay, getting treatment for burns on his arms. The doctor, a young woman named Lucy Carter, wrapped bandages around his injuries while scolding him for not coming to see her sooner. "You've had these burns for 3 days, Captain. They could have gotten infected." "I was busy," Jake said with a tired smile. "Running a ship, fighting a war, the usual things." Lucy shook her head but smiled back. "You're impossible. But I suppose that's why you're the captain. Hold still, I'm almost done." The door opened and Daniel Price walked in. He looked as tired as Jake felt. "Sir, I thought you'd want to know. The Galactic Council is calling an emergency session. They want you to attend via video link." "What's it about?" "They didn't say, but I'm guessing it's important. The Ambassador Helen Cross will be there too." An hour later, Jake sat in his ready room, looking at a screen showing the Galactic Council chamber. It was the same room where Helen had offered Earth's help weeks ago, but the atmosphere was completely different now. Instead of panic and fear, there was hope and excitement. Ambassador Helen spoke first. "Captain Morrison, on behalf of Earth and humanity, I want to congratulate you and your crew on a successful mission. The shipyard raid has changed the course of this war." Commander Vekthar stood up next. "The Council wishes to formally thank the crew of the USS Defiance. Your actions have saved billions of lives across the galaxy. We were fools to doubt you." Other delegates stood and spoke, each one praising the humans and their ship. They talked about courage and sacrifice. They talked about how one ship had done what thousands could not. It was nice to hear, but Jake was getting uncomfortable with all the attention. Finally, the head of the council, an ancient being called Elder Morna, spoke. She was from a species that lived for thousands of years and had seen many wars. "Captain Morrison, the council has voted unanimously to grant humanity a permanent seat on the Galactic Council. You have earned your place among the stars." Jake felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for his entire species. Earth had proven itself. Humanity was no longer the newcomer, the primitive species that barely understood space travel. They were equals now. "Thank you, Elder Morna," Jake said. "Earth accepts this honor, but I hope that this seat won't be needed for warfare much longer. I hope we can focus on peace." "We all share that hope," Morna replied. "The swarm is collapsing without their shipyards. Our fleets are pushing them back, system by system. The war is not over, but we can see the end now. Thanks to you." After the call ended, Jake sat alone for a while thinking. He thought about all the people who had died in this war. The swarm had killed billions before Earth even joined the galactic community. The Allied fleets had lost so many ships and crew members. Even the Defiance had lost 3 crew members. In the shipyard raid, good people who deserved to see the end of the war, but they had won. Not just survived, but actually won. That had to mean something. The following week, the USS Defiance limped back to Praxis Prime Station for major repairs. As they approached the station, something amazing happened. Every ship in the galactic fleet formed up in 2 long lines, creating a corridor for the Defiance to fly through. Thousands of ships from dozens of different species, all there to honor one human battleship. On the bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence. Lisa Moore had tears running down her face. Chris Palmer was smiling so wide his face hurt. Karen Shaw stood at attention, saluting the fleet even though they couldn't see her. "I never imagined anything like this," Daniel said quietly. "Neither did I," Jake replied. "But we earned it. Every person on this ship earned it." The Defiance docked at the station, and the crew finally got to rest. Real rest, not just quick naps between battles. They had meals together, shared stories, and tried to process everything they had been through. The station's crew treated them like heroes, which was nice, but also a bit overwhelming. Jake found Commander Vekthar waiting for him at a viewing port that looked out at the stars. The Praxian commander looked much better than the last time they met. His tentacles moved in relaxed patterns, and his color was bright and healthy. "Captain Morrison," Vekthar said, "I wanted to talk to you before your ship leaves for repairs." "We're not going anywhere for a while," Jake said. "The Defiance needs at least a month in the shipyard." "Will Earth send more ships to help finish the war?" Jake nodded. 3 more battleships are on their way. They should arrive in 2 weeks. And Command is building 6 more. By next year, Earth will have a real fleet. Vekthar's tentacles moved in a way that showed satisfaction. "Good. The galaxy needs humanity's strength and creativity. We have been fighting wars the same way for thousands of years. You showed us that new ideas can change everything." They stood in silence for a while, watching ships move around the station. In the distance, they could see the nebula where they had fought side by side. "I have a question," Vekthar said. "When you took your ship into the shipyards, you knew the odds of survival were very low. Yet you went anyway. Why? Why risk your life and your crew for species you barely knew?" Jake thought about how to answer. "On Earth, we have a saying. No man is an island. It means that no person exists alone. We're all connected to each other. When we joined the galactic community, those connections expanded. You became our neighbors, our friends, our responsibility. When your people were in trouble, how could we not help?" "Your species is remarkable," Vekthar said. "I look forward to learning more about human philosophy and culture. And I look forward to learning about yours. That's what peace is for, right? Learning about each other instead of fighting." Over the next months, the war slowly wound down. Without shipyards, the swarm couldn't replace their losses. Allied fleets reclaimed system after system. The 3 new human battleships arrived and joined the fight, each one as effective as the Defiance. The swarm's endless advance had turned into a retreat, then a collapse. 8 months after the shipyard raid, the last swarm vessel was destroyed. The war was over. The galaxy erupted in celebrations that lasted for weeks. Every species had their own way of celebrating, and humans got to experience all of them. The USS Defiance finally finished her repairs and returned to service. But instead of combat missions, she became a training ship. Captain Jake Morrison spent his days teaching other captains, both human and alien, about tactics and strategy. He shared everything he knew, holding nothing back. The goal was to make sure the galaxy could defend itself if another threat ever appeared. 1 year after the war ended, Jake stood on the observation deck of a space station, looking out at a peaceful galaxy. Beside him was Ambassador Helen Cross, who had flown up from Earth for a ceremony. "How does it feel to be a hero?" Helen asked with a slight smile. Jake shook his head. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a captain who did his job. The real heroes are the people who died in the war, the crew members who never made it home, the civilians who lost everything. They're the ones we should remember." "The galaxy remembers all of them," Helen said. "And they remember you too. You showed everyone what humanity could do. You proved that being new doesn't mean being weak." "We got lucky," Jake said. "Things could have gone very differently. Maybe. But luck favors the prepared, and you were definitely prepared. Earth chose the right person to command the Defiance." They watched as ships from 100 different species moved through space around the station. Trade ships, passenger ships, exploration vessels. The galaxy was healing, rebuilding, moving forward. There would be other challenges, other problems to solve. But for now, there was peace. Jake thought about his crew, scattered across the galaxy now. Some had returned to Earth. Others had stayed in space, joining the galactic fleet or exploring new worlds. They wrote to each other often, sharing stories and memories. The bonds they had formed in battle would last their entire lives. The USS Defiance was still out there, still flying, still proving what human engineering could accomplish. She had become a symbol of hope and cooperation between species. Children across the galaxy knew her name. Songs had been written about her. She would never be forgotten. And somewhere in the records of the Galactic Council, preserved forever, was the story of how humanity joined the galactic community. The story of how one species, new to the stars, had sent a single battleship to save an entire galaxy. It was a good story, Jake thought, the kind of story that inspired people to be brave, to help others, to never give up even when things looked impossible. That was humanity's real gift to the galaxy, not weapons or tactics or technology. It was hope. The hope that even the darkest situations could be turned around. The hope that courage and determination mattered. The hope that doing the right thing, even when it was hard, was always worth it. Jake smiled and turned away from the window. He had reports to write and lessons to prepare. Life went on even after wars ended. But now it went on in a galaxy where humans had proven their worth, where Earth had earned its place among the stars.